But I've heard people say, like just be on fire for God, you won't burn out. And while there's a truth in that, the truth is, if you understand where burnout comes from, you'll understand why changing a job might alleviate it for a while, but you could find yourself right back into the symptoms and effects.
But sometimes the healthiest, godliest thing you can do is just be real with each other and minister to one another, like Scripture tells you to.
Get in the well.
And just be.
You have to have multiple positive reinforcements to erase one negative.
We've been to our favorite restaurant hundreds of times.
Right.
But if we have a negative...
Which is McDonald's, by the way.
It is not McDonald's.
I'm looking for a sponsorship. I'm looking for some sort of...
But if we had a negative experience at a restaurant, we talk about that far more than positive experiences.
Story. Yeah, I mean, exactly. And those negative experiences can be redeemed.
Yeah.
But you're right. The negative sticks out, stays with us.
You talk about it. You'll tell your friends about a bad restaurant experience more than you'll tell about a good restaurant
Absolutely.
experience.
Well, welcome to the welcome to the table. So glad that you are with us. And man, it feels like it has been a long time since we have sat down like this to record. I feel like it's been a long time since I've seen you. Like,
it has
where
been
you
a long
been?
time.
What have you been doing with yourself? Like,
I've been doing a lot of homework.
Yeah.
And
my wife is in school because
yes.
she's awesome. And so
Yes.
taking psychology classes to try to figure me out. And I'm like, don't psychologize me. So I'm just kidding. She hasn't done that. You've actually done really well with that. I'm waiting for you to pull it out at some point. Be like,
nope.
I've been running an analysis of you for the last 2 years. And I found out
here's my 300-page.
You're tremendously insecure. And so, anyways, but what else you been doing with yourself?
I've been
being Gigi, couple grandbabies came along since
2 new
last time we were
grandbabies
together.
in December.
Yeah.
And
not from the same mother.
No,
2 different mothers.
Daughter
and daughter-in-law.
And daughter-in-law.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Very exciting. And I've been working a lot.
Yeah,
we're heading into budget season, and so
a lot of things happening around the church these days.
Lot of exciting things.
Yeah,
a lot of exciting things.
Which brings me, I'm actually pretty excited to discuss this topic today. And,
because we are not there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when we are,
but we've been there.
When we are there, I don't know that I've been there. I mean, I've had moments of.
I think
I've had symptoms of what we're going to talk about today.
Correct.
For sure.
I would say.
But we want to talk today, and I'm excited to talk about this because I don't know. I feel like this could be really helpful. Because there's a lot of conversation out there around this, probably, especially I think generationally. And I think this hopefully could be very helpful to not only ministry people, but even in business, work, school,
yes,
things of that nature. And it's all around the topic of burnout.
Yes.
And people who are feeling, as though, man, I just don't know how to, burnout and depression go hand in hand a lot of times.
Yes.
It's a major issue. But today, and some of this is really backed up. This is not just opinionated stuff. This is actually backed up with some research and some science. I believe in science. And so, and I believe in God too. So there you go. But it's backed up with some real helpful. And when I went through this, it was to full disclosure, went through an organizational psychologist, a professor that I had, a Professor Diddams, brilliant woman in the realm of just organizational industrial psychology. To put that on your resume.
Yes.
And
it's actually a pretty big field.
It is, right. Well, for sure. And how things work, how companies work, how churches work, and I think sometimes, again, I think we can over-spiritualize how churches work, and I think absolutely it's the work of the mysteries. Paul says we're the administrators of the mysteries of God,
right?
Talking about the gospel and the church and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're also administrators, which brings a very practical element to this to help us to understand how do we, in our instance, how do we do church well? If you're leading a business, if you're running a business, how do I lead a business well? Because we know that obviously, transition within employees, staffing is expensive. It costs a lot of money to replace people. You know, it's costs more to replace them, to sustain them.
Yep.
And there are times that transitions are good, planned, necessary things. You know, it's an important part of life. But then there are times, obviously, that it's a byproduct of perhaps burnout and struggles of that nature. And so I feel like this could be helpful to people. And I also keep thinking of my rocker, you know, 80s days. There's a song that was out by, I can't think of who it was. Maybe I have to Google that. But the whole song starts out, it's better to burn out than fade away. And so there's a lot of ministry.
I don't even know that
I know
song.
I probably wouldn't, but you could Google that. Def Leppard. See? That's what I'm talking about.
That's why I don't know that song.
It's better to burn out than fade away. You know, that's what it does. So you don't remember that song?
No.
It starts off with a guy speaking some like foreign, you know, you can put it in the, you can clip that in. That was in my less than Jesus days.
It's going to go downhill from here.
But it's a guy like speaking some weird like gibberish, and then he says it's better to burn out than fade away. And sometimes that's the attitude of ministry. Like, I got one life to live. I've even said this myself, unfortunately, from the pulpit. Oh, Lord help us. I'm so glad that well, this is actually on video, but I'm so glad that, you know, most of what I preached was never on video, because I would be branded a heretic. What didn't I say? That's probably a better question. But I remember I think I was in such a point of frustration. I really, honestly, out of my flesh, just frustrated. And I made this comment, really dumb comment, to our church. And so forgive me if you're a part of Zion City. But I made this really dumb comment about, like, you know, we got one life to do this in, and we'll sleep and we'll rest when we get to heaven. You know? And it was probably not the healthiest moment.
That is terrible theology.
It was probably not my grandest moment. And since the Lord has been working, I think in my life I have repented of such beliefs and whatnot.
I'm pretty sure it's one of the big.
But it is easy
to
get so caught up, especially when you talk about ministry. It's God's work,
right?
You know, and so it's easy just to get this mindset of like, I just got to go, and then on the flip side, I hear a lot of pastors talk about burnout in a way that almost feels as though they have the silver bullet as to avoid it. And I think we're actually going to give some really research, factual approaches to this. But I've heard people say, you know, like just be on fire for God, you won't burn out. And while there's a truth in that, you know, it probably is a little overly simplistic in terms of dealing with burnout. How do we get there? How do we deal with it? You know, I've heard people say things. Well, if you're burnt out, it's just because you're not spending time with the Lord. And yet, I've been in places where, like, I'm spending time with the Lord and I'm struggling, you know, to feel, you know, as though engaged in what I'm doing. And I think some of the research that has been shared with us and whatnot through just our learnings will be helpful in terms of, you know, how to avoid or recover, because you can recover.
Yes.
And sometimes
absolutely.
recovery is not just about changing jobs.
Right.
Yeah. Because the truth is, if you understand where burnout comes from, you'll understand why changing a job might alleviate it for a while, but you could find yourself right back into the symptoms and effects of burnout. Have you ever been burnout? You're an achiever. So, like, you know, high-paced. You know, our home is high-paced. Our personalities are high-paced.
Yes.
Like, we're like, let's get her done type people.
Yes. I don't know that I've ever thought about.
So then tell us, Dana, how do you
burnout?
Well, that's probably the truth of most mamas out there. Like, I don't have the luxury.
Like, what am I going to do?
These kids got to eat.
Hope that works out for you kids. Mom's just going to go back to bed.
But yet, I'm sure that's a reality for some.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it shows up more in terms of depression or things of that nature, which actually they're very closely related.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been burnt out.
Yeah, it probably is some truth to that moms like they just don't have the option.
Like you just
like, well, that kid's still going to wake up in the morning,
figure it out,
and then ministry of that sort. So let's talk about kind of what are the sources of burnout? And there are primarily three sources that really contribute to Any one of them can really begin this process. I think it's very interesting because they actually, I wrote this down. They actually define burnout. I want to read this to you. Burnout is the erosion of engagement over time. It is the erosion of because everybody I know, when they start a job, it's the best job ever.
Oh yeah,
best job ever. What I mean? It's
best
always
boss
best
ever.
church ever,
best church ever,
best ministry ever.
Yes,
and it's always the best thing. We're a bit of a fantasy of like, oh, it's just great, and it is great. But there's an erosion of engagement that happens over time, and the definition of the descriptor of it is that when you begin to put more energy into unhealthy coping mechanisms than going into the demands of the workplace. So meaning I'm spending more time, for instance, and we'll get into this a little bit, I spend more time trying to defend myself in those meetings where my boss is saying, hey, we got this deadline, this new project's come up, and we just start, I can't do that. And we respond from irritation, frustration. We've all seen that. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Probably have caused that, truthfully. Yeah. And it's we now become protective of just our life, our time, what will be called in this study resources. And trying to maintain what we have instead of being able to move into and effectively manage the work. So there are three areas. Let's talk about these areas, okay?
Okay.
And so I'm going to throw these things out, and you let's talk about. So keys to avoiding burnout are simply this. There are three components that are key to help us. Number one is meaningful relationships, right? Number two, we'll go back through these.
Yep.
Meaningful work.
Yep.
What I'm doing matters.
Yes.
And number three, meaningful mission.
Yes.
And so if you're sitting here and listening to this or watching this, if you've hung around this far, then what I would encourage is this. If you're feeling that burnout, or think of a time in your life in your burnout, consider which one of those three were being affected and what led to. So let's talk about the meaningful relationship part as it relates to how that plays into how do you think that plays into burnout and avoiding burnout?
Yeah. Well, I think something that you hear often in churches, especially interdepartmentally, is that departments get siloed.
Yeah.
There's a lack of teamwork across,
right,
and a lack of really relationship with others. And I think that kind of can play into, is my work meaningful? If I'm only looking at the one piece that I am contributing toward and I don't see any of the big picture, I don't have relationship, and I'm not really part of a bigger mission than just my thing that I'm doing. So I think that's a huge trap that we can fall into, especially within churches. Right.
And what they say the counteract to that is the overwhelming isolation. When we start isolating and pulling back, which only makes sense, I guess, in some regard, if you're frustrated with your boss, coworkers, because of maybe they're not carrying their weight, maybe they're overly demanding, or maybe you feel like, at least you feel. And we're talking about what you feel. May or may not be true, but it feels real to you.
Right.
And so it's easy to withdraw.
Yeah.
Because you're conserving your resources and like, I don't have time to go have a hard conversation. I got to get this stuff done.
Yeah. I remember a time in ministry where you had kind of determined that you were going to make relationship and start, moving outside of just, this was back when we were in youth ministry. Yeah. And I remember you coming home from a staff meeting one day and saying, I just threw my hands up, so forget it. I'm going back to youth ministry over here because I can control it, and and
true.
I know what I'm kind of in control of how successful at least this
what
piece
I can control.
Is. Yeah.
Thinking that will somehow keep us from the stress of burnout, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it only adds to it because we isolate ourselves.
Yeah.
So if you think about meaningful relationships and how they play into, one of the things we work very hard at Zion City is is building relationships among staff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't hear this. I'm really nervous to say such a thing because, you know, I may have a list of 14 staff members that comment on this, but like, no, that's not true at all. But I don't really hear a lot of people around here talking about burnout. Is that, am I just, of course, I'm in this seat, so I'm probably not talking directly to people in that regard. But I've seen people, and we've had busy seasons, which we try to always balance. And we'll talk about, I think, another part that's not in this study is the part of rest.
Right.
You know, you got one life to live. Rest while you're in heaven. That's what I say. But
please ignore that statement. Whatever
that's
you
not a good
do.
one. That's things you should never listen to. So, but I don't know. What's your take on that? What's your take on that? Are you burned out, Isaac? He's like, no, Pastor, absolutely not. I am so deeply relationally connected to you right now. Yeah, okay, exactly.
I don't get that sense.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. So.
But again, you know, that's the struggle.
Right.
But I can say, I've not heard that even, you know, from people that I'm in relationship with that I feel like others on staff would share that with.
Yeah.
If they.
I'm not saying there's not struggles and challenges and placements
absolutely.
and heavy workloads, and it's time to readdress the job, you know, or figure out how to split this labor, and too much, you know, absolutely. Yeah. That's the nature of growing anything, you know, is like there's going to be pain points where you go like, we got to change how we do that. Mm-hmm. We certainly hear some of that stuff, but I think just the terms, and I think if that is true, if it were true, I won't say that it is true. If it were true, I would say hopefully it's because there is, number one, a sense of relationship, that there are people that you can, whether it's oversights or whether it's peers in our tribes,
I do
you
think
can build relationship with people.
Yeah, it's been super rewarding to see, even from my perspective, people in different ministries, different departments that have relationship with each other. And I think that our tribe setting really fosters
So I want you to
that.
explain tribes, because people that don't know us don't know what we call tribes. It's a small group, but explain that.
Yeah. So tribes are we give the employees an hour every other week.
Right.
On 1 week we have staff prayer.
Right.
On Wednesdays.
These are all Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays. And on the opposite weeks, they have tribe time, and those tribes are put together, made up of about 4 people. And they're all from typically different departments, different campuses even, and they just have a time to get together.
And typically, safe to say, not their
oversights.
Yeah, people
not their boss.
So somebody from the youth ministry is in a group with an administrative assistant in the accounting department.
Yes.
With a maintenance team member, with a pastor, a worship pastor. Like Correct. They have nothing.
Correct.
Besides being on the same team, they have nothing to do with each other.
Yes. And it's just a time that they can share their highs and lows, their challenges, and just receive what they need relationally from other people that they work with.
Right.
It's a place that they can talk about this really. I started to say sucks. Can I say sucks on this?
You actually say that quite often. So
this really stinks.
If I say it, then people are like, "You're going to hell." You say it like, "Oh, she's so cute." She just says it like it is.
Or this is what's great. It's a time that they celebrate together, and it's a time that they just have empathy for one another and give input.
Yeah. So to put some framework around this to help, because if there are, and I think this could be true even. You may not be able to do this in a business. I think you could. It's a process group. Mm-hmm. It's a group for people to process just life, time to slow down, have conversations that are transparent, vulnerable conversations at times. Yes. Many a tear are shed in our tribes, from what I hear. I don't have video cameras at every one of them, so I don't know. But
just have video cameras at any of them.
It would probably diminish the effectiveness of such a moment. And it's we from a process group standpoint, it's what is your high, thorn and rose? What are you excited about? Which everybody's pretty good about. Like, I'm excited because I got vacation coming. Yeah. And then there's a low. What are you struggling with? And over time, I'm sure the transparency of this kind of increases,
Right.
and life happens.
Yeah.
And people can share with each other like, man.
Yeah.
And it might even, so what would you say? Here's the challenging point. I know for probably pastor friends, ministry friends who are watching this are like, oh, so you have a gossip session every other week. That's what you have. So how would you, I mean, that sounds dangerous. Like that sounds, like if you're going to get people together, and what if they talk about the pastor? And actually, they probably do.
Yeah.
They probably talk about ministry situations, I would expect,
Yeah.
quite often in that
Yeah.
setting.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that? How do you address that? Like, how do we address that?
Well, we assume that they are talking
Right.
about struggles,
Right.
and we want them to, because what we believe is that if you share your struggles with other Jesus-loving people that are
Right.
on your team, number one, it's rarely about needing to fix
Right.
the problem. It's about addressing
Right.
the emotional state of the person that's sharing.
Right.
It is,
And so we use people fuel,
yes.
vocabulary of language of emotions there.
Mm-hmm.
But we also, the big question at the end of this is not like, oh, sorry about your luck.
Right.
Sorry about your bad life.
Yeah.
It is, what do you need?
What do you need?
And so it's to facilitate you receiving from the body of Christ, truthfully,
Right.
believers,
Yes.
who you happen to work with,
Yes.
what you need. Hey,
Yes.
do you need encouragement?
Yeah.
Hey, do you need advice?
Yeah.
And let them say it rather than me going, I have some advice for
Right.
you. If
Right.
it's not welcomed, truthfully, it's not received.
Yeah.
If it's not asked for, it's not
Yeah.
received. So by allowing them to kind of author this and go like, I just need containment.
Right.
I need to just get this frustration out. I'm so tired. I feel like I've been working for 4 days, 5 days, 10 days straight.
Mm-hmm.
And some containment so that someone can go, hey, and I'm sure there's encouragement that happens regardless.
Right.
But it's really, and the other component of this I think is so important is it's never about fixing the problem. It's not even about the other party in the problem.
No.
It's about you in
Yes.
this problem.
Yes.
What do you need
Right.
from your support system, from your meaningful relationships?
Right.
And our heart in doing this years ago, I think we've been doing this now for a couple of years, I think.
3 years? 4 years?
4 years?
4 or 5?
And here's the thing. The thing I would say is anybody's like, well, they're going to talk bad. I'm like, if they're going to talk bad, they're going to talk bad either way.
Right.
And the
Why
problem,
not-
the
why
truth
not
is
give them
this:
a place
if they're
that-
going to gossip about something in a negative way, and it's not in a safe place, like a healthy place where someone can go like, I hear you, I see you, that's tough, and I'm with you, and they pray for them as well. So there is a spiritual element to this.
Right.
But if they're not talking about it in a healthy place, they're probably gossiping or talking or complaining or criticizing in an unhealthy place, and it only gets increased
Right.
in that result.
Right.
And everybody has to choose their level of vulnerability. We don't
Right.
demand you get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
And I think that's a huge part of helping to build cross-pollinated, so what I would encourage people who are in these situations to go like, okay, maybe I'm not the boss. Maybe I don't even have a ministry or a business. Maybe I'm just this person who's working in a company. How would you encourage them to facilitate such a thing?
I would grab some people and let's go grab lunch.
Right.
Hey, every Thursday we're going to get lunch together,
Right.
or the first Thursday of every month we're going to, just get together. And I think sometimes as Christians we think that has to just, we're going to have a Bible study and
Right,
somebody's
right.
going to prepare something.
Right.
But sometimes the healthiest, godliest thing you can do is just be real
Right.
with each other
Yeah.
and minister to one another,
Yeah.
like Scripture tells you to.
Get in the well.
And just be and pray
Right.
with each other,
Right.
pray for each other.
Right.
Even if you can't, like, hey, we don't have time to, but hey, how you doing? Okay,
Right.
hey, I'm going to be praying for you, and circle back around.
Totally.
but
totally.
but
Bear the
invest
burden. Yeah.
invest in your own emotional health by investing in others relationally.
Yeah. And I do think that the fact that we operate out of a framework of like People Fuel, the book, which is by Townsend, I think.
John Townsend.
A believer, psychologist, professionals, good structure, good help. It keeps it from becoming just a gossip gripe session.
Right.
Because we're here to do something positive. It's a meaningful relationship,
Yes.
not a destructive, toxic relationship.
Right.
I'm not adding fuel to your fire.
Right.
I'm here to just walk with you. And I
Right.
think that's a helpful piece for people to know. I have people I can talk to, or people who know, hey, I'm struggling with this situation.
Right.
And I think it's been a major piece for us.
Yes.
Not perfected everything.
No.
But number one, cross-pollination of our staff, so there is not this polar separation. Like I'm in the youth and you're in the worship, and we don't like each other, and we try to steal the same people, the buildings, and the money. Not steal it, but acquire it.
Yeah.
And that's always the fight.
Right.
And I think it just helps to break down those barriers. So meaningful relationships, that's pretty clear. Just finding people. I would say in your workplace, outside of your workplace, anything that kills isolation is going to breathe life to you.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And it's interesting because not only is it relationships, so places that are non-relational, are going to be. And the other thing I would say is that we use this statement a lot around here, that things begin organized and move to organic. And that's really the heart that we have, like even in groups in our church, but in these process groups in our staff, is that what our heart is like, here's the organized version of this. It's every other Wednesday at 11 o'clock for 1 hour. But the thought is, once you learn to live in this rhythm, then you'll naturally live more likely with your spouse in this rhythm.
Right.
Like, hey, what do you need from me?
Right.
I could say we've been married for 33 plus 4 years, I think at this point. We're getting up there.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, I don't know that I ever asked you, hey, what do you need from me? What do you need? You know what I mean?
Right.
I should. You would think intuitively you'd know, and I don't know that you ever asked me that either. I don't think we knew to like. We just thought, well, if you're upset, then I need to either fix it, or if you're upset, I need to stay out of your way, or I need to argue with you and tell you why what you think is wrong. And so, none of that was helpful.
Right.
But if I would have said, hey, what do you need? I just need some containment. I need to just vent for a second, and I'm good. And then I just need you to hold me.
But
now we don't have our process groups hold each other at the end of it, like big cinnamon roll hug. We don't do that, but
I do think
because that's illegal. So.
What's important though is to understand that a lot of people don't have the language of I need containment.
I agree.
I need.
We didn't.
Right. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so honestly, that book that I think Isaac can put in the links.
Yeah,
People Fuel has great language that's super helpful for people to learn to ask for what they need, because that's what adults do.
Well, and that's the thing. And I preached it Sunday when I was talking about offense.
Yeah.
Men have one, preferred, permissible emotion, and it's called a couple of things in variation, but it's anger. And we talked about, anger is a second emotion. There's actually something deeper than anger every time. So if someone's angry, it's actually, something deeper, a wound, a hurt, frustrations, perhaps, sadness. But yet as men, you're not taught, you're not even given the tools of vocabulary most often to go, man, that really hurt my feelings because that sounds weak. Or man, I'm sad because that sounds weak. But anger seems to be the thing that's macho. It's the macho emotion.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's like we use a sledgehammer of anger at everything.
Yeah.
And then wonder why, our kids disconnect from us because oh, dad's mad. Instead of like dad's worried, dad's struggling. He's stressed out right now with, he may lose his job, cutbacks, things like that. And so I just think that it is a great tool. It's great. And to be able to read a list and go, this is really what I'm feeling.
Right.
And to be able to express that in a meaningful relationship and receive nourishment for what you need.
Right.
I think it helps us to avoid burnout in just life.
Yes.
In general, having those. Now, I have this even, and we've talked a little bit about this, but we have a group, and it's a fairly small group at this point, because I pretty much run everybody off. No, I'm just kidding. But it is that. It is nothing but a life-giving.
Yeah.
Just enjoy, laugh, eat.
Yep.
And stay away from isolation.
Yes.
Stay away from being alone, and as a pastor, having some of those people in your life that we're just where do you want to eat tonight? We're trying someplace new.
Yep.
And I think it's incredibly helpful to keep those emotional, those pitfalls from meaningful work. I think this is the next piece. So you got great relationships now, meaningful work. So describe what you think in your words, what that really boils down to. Welcome back from the break. My wife drooled all over her shirt.
I was so excited about you.
Right. Sometimes it happens, folks. She just looks across the room and something else.
No, I was just trying to finish my water and I spilled it all over me. So my apologies.
You're going to actually try this with an open cup now, so that's good.
I went from
that's why we have sippy cups.
A sippy cup that wasn't working.
All right, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So in case you don't understand what just happened, my wife needed some sort of energy drink because I was boring her to death, and then she slobbered on herself, and so it was tremendously. I'm sorry you had to see that, Isaac. It was,
Would you stop?
She didn't slobber. It was.
I didn't slobber.
You tried to empty your cup.
I tried to empty my cup. I spilled it all over me. And
now I'm just gonna look at the wet spot on your shirt all the time. So, so anyways,
I'm up here.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Perfect. Okay.
Talk about meaningful work.
This is so meaningful to me right now. Meaningful work. Yeah, we were about to talk about some meaningful work. So it's obviously what you do matters.
Yeah.
And the counteract to this is what kills meaningful work is just depleting tasks. Mm-hmm. I think we've all been in those jobs where making widgets, does this even matter? I mean, you can do that for a while probably as it relates to if there's a great motivation of I got to pay my bills,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you cannot, and I would say this, certainly within the church world, you feel like meaningful work is at arm's grasp. I mean, we're doing this for the Lord, So one would think, and I think this is probably the challenge for people who come into ministry, is that they think I'm gonna just do kingdom work all the time, and then they end up being the guy like I was years ago. Hey, can you run to Sam's Club and pick up the whatever? Mm-hmm. Now, I think what's important to understand though is you can make any work meaningful work.
With the right perspective.
Yeah. If I'm going to pick up this thing because it's going to help this ministry and people are going to be impacted.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I go through that process every time.
Right.
But I know if I'm struggling with feeling like this is just meaningless stuff.
Yeah.
If I can find meaning in it, then it's going to help me keep from becoming burnt out in that regard. But I do want to back up just for a second on meaningful relationships as it relates to the ministry part of it. I do think that our relationship with the Holy Spirit, our relationship with God is so, when we lose that, we are losing the most important, meaningful relationship. Yes. So this is where I give some credence to the guys who say, just stay in your word and you'll not burn out. Mm-hmm. And I would take it a bit further. I don't think it's just the perfunctory act of read my Bible. I think it's relationship, staying in relationship, working active relationship with the Holy Spirit, the active agent of God on the earth today.
Yes.
Staying in relationship with the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That will keep it should stir you into meaningful people relationships too.
Yeah.
If we lose that.
Yeah. Because if you're in the Word, if you're in relationship with Holy Spirit, He's going to drive you to do what the Word tells you to do, which is to be in relationship.
Yeah, totally. And I think the thing is you'll often hear people who, are struggling, burnout, moral failures, it used to be anyways, I just stopped reading my Bible. And really what they're saying is I broke fellowship with the most meaningful relationship that I had. Mm-hmm. And I started there. I let that go. Yeah. I got distracted. I got busy. I got bored.
Yep.
I stopped pressing, and there are times you just have to press through in any relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to work on this thing.
Yeah.
And I do want to say in that meaningful relationship, especially as it relates, I think it's true in anything you're doing if you're a believer. Mm-hmm. But I think I just want to make sure that we weave that into, because I do think there's that spiritual dynamic. Now, I don't think it's only having that.
Correct.
Because I don't think you can. I think if you're meaningfully, actively involved with the Holy Spirit, He's going to lead you into life-giving relationships that you'll need to work towards and work through and hold space for and prioritize in your life.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. So meaningful work, let's jump back on the meaningful work. So we can find meaning in the work that we're doing.
Yes. But I think there's also, there's a level of maturity required to understand that with every job that you do, there are depleting tasks.
Yeah.
There are things that just have to be done.
Right.
And so having a realistic expectation that I spend some of my time doing this stuff that's super, super meaningful to me. And I have other times that this is just the stuff that has to get done.
Right.
So I can do this stuff.
And there comes a point, I think, as you develop, and you probably advance in ministry, that yes, you could start raising up people and delegating things to people who that is meaningful to them.
Right.
I know but the difference between me and you in some regards is like, you love things that just like detail things, and I just go, I'm out. Like I just don't have the space for it in my brain, because you lose me. I need an energy drink, at that point, right? But it's very meaningful to you, and again, you're connecting it to a much bigger, broad. This is going to help our staff. It's going to help us do this. It's going to help the church. So it's always based out of a meaningful position. And I think it's so important that we go back and recapture the meaning of everything we're doing. Like, why am I doing this?
And I think as leaders that are listening to this, slowing down enough to recognize and place value on tasks that you might not find value in is super important as you lead.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can encourage those that you're leading, that whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's sweeping a floor or paying a bill or straightening pictures that are hung on the wall, if you can encourage them at the difference that makes,
right.
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, helping to see the difference,
helping them to see it, but also learning to value what they value. Like, I love it when you say, like, I love that you did X, Y, Z, and I know that for you, making sure that account is balanced to the penny, doesn't, man, I love that. You appreciate it.
I do.
But it doesn't make you feel like, man, that's really making a difference. But when you communicate to me, I get why that makes a difference.
Right.
That's life-giving to others.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes as pastors, that even pastors that I have served, at times doing the detail stuff and having it just kind of glazed over and not appreciated, man, pastors, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot when you don't slow down and realize that everything that every person does in your church, in ministry, is what makes the thing go. And people need. That's a nutrient that people need. They need encouragement from their leader too.
Yeah.
And that's as meaningful a work, you encouraging those that you're leading.
Yeah.
And
again, when you understand the meaning of that, like I am encouraging, calling out, recognizing. You're not just buttering people up. I'm actually, recognizing God-given giftings, callings, abilities, anointing, strengths in you that are adding value to the overall, and we'll talk about meaningful mission.
Right.
But like it's this stuff matters. It's meaningful work. I do think one of the challenges with especially a younger generation coming into ministry, and it could be any generation, it repeats in every generation, I think, is that, what is visible, the preaching, the teaching, the travel, maybe because I've had people a lot of times come to me and say, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And, because I'm like, I'm not sure you know what I do.
Right.
And it's not like I have this incredibly hard, difficult, harder than anybody job. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm like, you're misunderstanding where the bulk of my time is really allotted in terms of, and it may not feel meaningful to sit in a room and meet with people over things, or just be studying to prepare a message, that will be helpful, impactful, then the way you live, anointing wise, to couple giftedness and anointedness together.
Right.
And so I'm like, if you're judging everything, that's why I think when they get into ministry and they see all this, like, especially entry points, like all this just stuff you have to do, it could become very overwhelming and lead to burnout. Like, well, all I do is just, and I'm like, yeah, but that's part of the meaningful work of what we do, to go beyond just the pulpit moments or the platform moments, that are few and far between. And and honestly, I think I feel like everything we do outside of that enhances that.
Correct.
It should.
It should.
Like, it's meaningful because, like, doing this over here is going to make that.
Right.
And that's really, this detail is going to help that. And it's going to make a better, connection point for people or whatever that might be.
Right.
And so
Right.
finding meaning in your work. Now, let's be honest. There's some meaning that some work, I suppose, in secular realms especially, and that's just not, if I'm working somewhere in a call center, I mean, like, this is not, except the meaning is I'm providing an income that will allow whatever, maybe it's, feeding my family. Of course, that's meaningful. This is why we do it.
Right.
And it can help us to stay focused, and not lose track of the meaningful stuff that we find. The last part of this is meaningful mission. And what the struggle we run into with this is mission drift.
I would really love you to talk about this because I think that you had talked about writing a book somewhat about this.
Did I tell you what that book was going to be? Did I tell you what I was going to say in that book? Because I don't know what you're talking about. No. Right. Meaningful mission. In what sense of the word? I'm not following you.
I thought you had talked about writing a book on drifting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a book on drifting or if it's part of something else, you know what I mean? But I do think that drift is a natural human tendency. Mm-hmm. And it certainly is an organizational tendency. Mm-hmm. Drift is just what we do. It, and drift, just taking our hands off stuff and letting it go is never really going to turn out well. You know what I'm saying? It's like just things disseminate into chaos. You know what I mean? Things will naturally be left on, outside inputs, law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics, a part of it, deep down into it is this, you need outside inputs and direction and meaning, So I would just say this, the drift is natural and must be addressed. And I think that's one of the key roles, I think, in leadership is that we are working on ministry or working on our business to stay true. Because here's the thing, everybody started their business. If it's a business person, you started it or you own it for a reason. Mm-hmm. There was a motive, probably beyond the most successful ones, more than just making money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because those aren't the ones that really kill it. Right. Because there's no mission, there's no meaningful work. You just get tired of it. And we see so much of what really connects with the heart of people and creates, you think about all the big companies that are out there. If you go back to their missions, I mean, they're these audacious missions, that they put into place, like we're going to change the world or, and it's having that placard that says, this is what the meaningful work is.
Right.
And working on it, especially go back to church world, working on it to ensure that we're accomplished. So if we say as a church, our goal is to encounter God and to transform culture, that's a pretty big one, that's a mouthful to change a culture. Yeah. And we don't realize, and some of that is personally changing the culture of your home, right? Changing the culture of your family, you know what I mean?
Right.
To a more healthy, spiritual, whatever that might be. And that's where it begins, and it works its way out into a culture of a city, of a state, you know, and so now we can look, but there can be a drift and pull to like, okay, well, and it helps us to measure and go like, does this help us do that meaningfully? And if it doesn't, we got to stop doing it. You know what I mean? Or we got to place it correctly or modify it so that it does.
Right.
And so I think drift is just a part of human nature, something that given time, there's a ton of companies that used to be amazing at what they did. Right. And then they've just have drifted from that. And now we're like, I don't, and I think about places like McDonald's. And it's funny because if you watch the reiteration of these kind of places, like they go from like, we're going to be healthy McDonald's now, salads. And I'm like, that ain't your deal. People don't go there. And it's honestly, if you look at McDonald's, like they're one of the biggest landowners, like real estate owners in the world, And so part of their wealth is not even really about selling you a burger. It's about the buildings and the land it's on. And that's where their asset wealth comes from. Yeah. And most of them have what? Play places. Yeah. You know what I mean? So for them, like, we're going to create a place where kids come play and parents get suckered into buying them Happy Meals, Yeah. And so when they try to get off that and they drift into all these
Right.
other things and are pulled by culture and the health. Oh, you got to be healthy, and I don't disagree with that, but I'm like,
Right.
that's not your space, and that's the beauty of like the Chick-fil-A's of the world that just they just run a simple like we sell chicken one of two ways, you know. I mean, it's just
Fried or not fried?
yeah. I mean, it's
without fried or
I mean,
not
it's a
fried.
sandwich or it's strips, and that's
Yep.
what it is. And like, there is no. I mean, it's so simple, and I think there's a call, and so the easiest way to fight drift is just stay simple, as simple as you can. But as churches, organizations grow, they become more complex. And the more, what I've found is, and we wrestle against this. We're a 50-year-old church. Obviously, we've been here 20 years on staff and 8 years as senior pastors. And it's so easy for things. I mean, there's times that like I'll come up on something and, working on ministry. And in my mind, I'm not accusing anybody, but it's like, how in the world did we get here? And I'm just going like, I just understand it's the drift that we have to come back and work on ministry, not just work in ministry.
Right.
Because, and I think what this is important, Margaret Diddams, who was this professor, made this statement. She said that burnout is an organizational issue as much as it is a personal issue. And so we who lead, whatever we lead, in our home, I mean, the same thing's true at home.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that there's a mission, this is what our family's about.
Yeah.
And we've done this.
Yes.
This is what we value.
Yep.
We want to make sure that there is meaningful things that we're doing together, and there's meaningful relationships, and that keeps us from, feeling this angst towards even that process. And so we kind of wrap this deal up, but I wanted to wrap this up with they talk about the burnout is when I'm trying to conserve, hold on to my space, maintain versus being able to move forward. And so when I don't have meaningful relationships, don't have meaningful work, don't have meaningful mission, I'm not a part of something going somewhere, right? Then I'm going to, over time, it erodes, and I'm going to start trying to conserve and hold on to. And there are key principles, there's actually a theory of conservation of resources, actually what it is called. But I thought this was interesting as it relates to burnout.
Okay.
And it says this: negative events have a stronger impact than positive events. So you're working your job, and negative things happen, stick with us longer.
Yes.
And more assured than the positive things that happen.
Right.
We could win the day, make the sale, but then all of a sudden the next day we lose, something. And it's like we are more impacted by the negative than even the positive.
Yeah.
And so it's important to understand that. I heard someone say, I think you have to have, I think it was actually in this class, you have to have like 5 positive statements to erase 1 negative. It might even be bigger than that. You could Google it, but there's actually, you have to have multiple positive reinforcements to erase 1 negative encounter.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And so I think that's important to understand. Like, I don't know that we can always change that, but we know how to deal with it.
Right. But I think, it's easy to recognize.
Right.
Like, we've been to our favorite restaurant hundreds of times.
Right.
But if we have a negative...
Which is McDonald's, by the way.
It is not McDonald's.
I'm looking for a sponsorship. I'm looking for some sort of...
But if we had a negative experience at a restaurant, we talk about that far more than positive experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And those negative experiences can be redeemed.
Yeah.
But you're right. The negative sticks out, stays with us.
You talk about it. You'll tell your friends about a bad restaurant experience more than you'll tell about a good restaurant experience.
So it goes on to say in this principle that we also should engage in active engagement in resource restoration, because I don't want to just tell people like, here's what's causing this. And it says that individuals must intentionally work to rebuild depleted resources in their life. So if I don't have the relationship, because I think the tendency when you're burnt out is just be like, forget it, and just chuck it all, and
bed.
you know what I mean? I'm going to stay in bed. I'm quitting the job. And the problem is you go someplace else and don't have those elements there. And again, I think you'll have them for a while because you always join a meaningful place to work.
Right.
Right. And you're going to do something important there.
Or you get a meaningful paycheck.
Right.
One of the two.
Right. Well, you're going to do something important.
Yeah.
Well, I got a better job over here because it's going to be doing this. How many times you heard people talk about the new job like it's just like, I'm like, why'd you take the first job if this is the best one ever?
Right.
But over time,
right.
the drift
right.
sets in. And so we have to actively engage in building the relationships, in managing the resources, making sure our cup's filled in that regard. It talks about downward spirals without active resource replenishment, this process. Depletion can accelerate, leading into further exhaustion. So it starts taking its toll, and you don't go – wait. And I think this is probably the lesson we've learned through our group. I've learned. I can't speak for you. I don't know what you've learned from it. But
I've learned I like you better when we're in a group.
Exactly. Well, there you go. There's enough said. But I think, I've learned while my feelings would say I'm tired, because we do it on a Sunday night.
Yep.
So I'm physically tired.
Yes.
I've been up really early. Yep. I'm spent, in many ways. And now I'm going to go hang out with people. And for my personality, even, I'm I'm fairly introverted. But these are really life-giving people for us. We really enjoy them. They're good people, and they understand. They know what we're doing. They know what they are for us, and and they are engaging in meaningful work of helping us remain sane. And so, but it's counterintuitive. I got to go okay, let's get up. We're going to go to dinner. Now I'm always excited for it now.
Yes.
And I'm far less probably burned out than I've ever been in that regard.
I would agree.
And so
it's amazing to me doing something that is so counterintuitive, especially on a Sunday night for us.
Yeah.
The difference in your fun level. I said I like you better when we're in group. I wasn't meaning that as a slam. I was just it replenishes you.
Yeah.
You're more fun, not just at that setting, but throughout the week.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, and I agree, because it's a downward spiral.
Yes.
Because what would happen historically is, Sunday night I go home and I would sit and think about, things that I said or said wrong, or
things that you did.
I just flipped the congregation off, I didn't really, but it's close. And so, you know what I mean? And that's, you have to go watch the message from last week if you want to know what that's about. But making a point, and having a blast with it. And then later on, you're just like, oh, I can't believe, I did
really say that?
I did think the good news. I think the good news out of that message was the whole message was on forgiveness. So I'm like, well, if somebody's offended by me, they just know they have to forgive me. And so I gave them the map. And so, but what would happen is something like that, or I just didn't get there, and even just being fatigued.
Yes.
Just being like, I'm just tired, and I got meetings tomorrow and all this, and then the spiral would start, and I would eventually wander off to sleep, veg out, sit and watch, Netflix or whatever, go to sleep, eat, and then wake up the next morning in the same disposition,
right?
Overthinking things,
right.
And then go into meetings, and now
right.
you're interacting. The meaningful relationships are taking a hit because you're kind of acting grumpy,
right?
People are like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Right.
And it's pretty easy to feel me when I walk in the room of
Yep.
is he happy or not?
Yep.
And so it's I just think that spiral piece is you've got to do the replenishing work.
Yes.
And then finally said in this conservation, there's a defensive response when resources are low. So there's a diminished relationship, meaning, purpose. Individuals become defensive or aggressive to protect their remaining. How many times have we seen this?
Yes.
It's like they hit DEFCON 5 and you're like, what's going on, man?
Yeah.
And it's because what they're really trying to do is I can't be away from home one more night a week, which we're like, we don't want you to be. What's going on?
Right.
But these things start drifting and diminishing and all of that.
Yep.
And again, the front, it's far easier to stop burnout from the front side, obviously, to prevent it.
Yes.
Because we get so caught up in the feels of it all.
Right.
And the emotion.
Right.
And so the last piece of this that wasn't necessarily, but I think it is a resource that feeds all other resources that we deal with burnout is rest.
Yes.
And so I want us to talk a little bit about just our rhythms of rest. What does that look like? Margin, space, Sabbath, sabbaticals, solitudes, things like that. So talk about that.
We should do it.
We are, yes.
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 We so we are very strong on especially our Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't work
Yeah.
on our Sabbath. Now, I will tell you that in ministry,
Right.
there
Sometimes
are days
the donkey falls in the ditch. Yeah.
that our Sabbath has to move around.
Right. Yeah, and the reality on that is it's a gift to us. It's
Yes.
not a legalistic thing.
Correct.
And so that gift can be applied in a workable, approachable, right space.
Right.
So,
Right.
that Sabbath may be a Friday, or it might be the Saturday if
Right.
there is a demand on us for ministry.
Yeah.
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 But the principle, and I think that Sabbath is a principle. It was
Yes.
an Old Testament law,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's a principle that still is for us.
Yes.
One day of rest.
Yes.
Whatever that
One
looks
day
like.
in 7.
Yeah, one day of rest and worship on the Lord, and
Uh-huh.
recreating, recreating,
Yep.
refreshing, that sort of
Yep.
thing. To where the simple question, and I've heard this said before, I think it's a great way to say it, because people are always like, "What do you do on your Sabbath?" And it's not important what I do on my Sabbath necessarily, as much as it's important what I don't do. And what I don't do is work.
Yes.
Now, let me say this: I think one of the struggles we have with people and their aversion to work is like you don't need 7 Sabbaths, you need one
Yes.
Sabbath. And if you don't have work in your life, active, ongoing work, then a Sabbath is useless.
Yes.
And if you don't have Sabbath, then you're on a path to deplete the resources,
Yes.
the God-given resources of your life,
Yes.
and head down the paths of emotional struggles and burnout, things like that. But I think we just simply don't work. I think one of the strongest principles that really hit me out of this, and in terms of principle, is the Old Testament. A lot of times it talks about, from Israel, it says, when you go out, the manna, if you go out and collect, on the Sabbath, it's rotten. If you go and sow on the Sabbath, you won't reap on the Sabbath. And so the indication is I could go do my work, but I don't get results.
Right.
And I'm like, man, I don't want to do work and not get results, because
Right.
you want to talk about meaningless.
Yeah.
You want to talk about meaningless mission drift,
Yeah.
like to go study, meet, work, talk, plan, and have it all come up to nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, what? You talk about the greatest meaningless work there is.
Right.
And so I think for me, that really hit me. Like, I can do this work on this day if I'm going to be in violation of that principle, but it's not going to result well. It's
Right.
not going to produce what God will produce through it
Right.
by honoring this principle in His Word.
Right.
And living according to it, saying,
Yes.
putting some boundaries around it,
Yes.
and saying, okay, God, I'm trusting you
Yeah.
that you'll be more productive in these 6 days, than I could be in all 7 of them.
Yes.
And I think that was probably one of the strongest, like, for me anyways, the way my brain works is like,
Right.
oh, I don't want to do stuff. I'm not a big time waster guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to sit around and spin my wheels and have nothing come of it.
Yeah.
And so I think rest is an essential part of this because it is a resource. It
Yeah.
is a God-given rhythm
Yes.
of rest,
Yes.
sleep, rest, recreate, that sort of thing in your life. See what I'm saying? I got you yawning. See, so careful, don't take a drink right now because you just about dried up. So anyways, so I encourage you. We encourage people to rest.
Yes.
Days off. Vacations.
Use your vacation
Yeah.
time.
I think sometimes in ministry, this is where the meaningful work can overtake the principles of Sabbath. We go like, I just got to do this. And I'm like, that's really an unhealthy approach to trusting God, that God can do what you can't do,
Right.
even in your absence, if you're
Right.
honoring Him.
Right.
I think that's such an important part to it. So,
Right.
Anything else on rest you want to throw out there that take naps?
Take naps. I love naps.
Yeah.
I don't get them very often.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, I can't nap anymore. You know how it is. I can nap for a few minutes unless I'm really, really tired. And then if I'm really, really tired, then I'm like, I'll see you next week. So anyways, so awesome. Well, I hope this has been helpful.
Hey, I enjoyed doing this with you today.
This was meaningful to me and great relationships. Can you turn away? We're gonna kiss. Poor Isaac. He's like, this is so awkward. But yeah, I enjoyed it with you as well. And I feel like it's meaningful. I feel like it's good times, good people. And but that's our heart. That's what the whole mission of the table is to connect with you and to be helpful and to be a blessing. And so if this is helpful to you, make sure you comment, connect with us, like it, subscribe to the channel, pass it along. I think there's this magical algorithm out there that you're completely in charge of by what you do, and it helps us to just get the word out and reach more people. So this first year, we've just gone through our first year of the table, I think,
Wow.
and we were just talking about that.
Isaac told us.
Yeah, and so good things, and we're figuring it out. not awesome, but we're having a great time. So, that's all that matters.
I like the people I'm doing it with. So there you go.
There you go. And so I appreciate that. I like you too. So, all right. Well, anyways, love you guys. Look forward to seeing you soon again at the table and hearing your comments. And until then, take some time and rest and find some meaningful work, meaningful relationships, and do something important with your life.
Amen.
Amen. All right. See you later.